The 12-story building came down at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Concrete, steel, and glass crashed into the street, trapping 17 construction workers beneath tons of debris. Emergency responders were 20 minutes away, but Mike Torres was already moving. His co-workers thought he was just another hard hat trying to help. They had no idea that the man climbing through the wreckage had spent 25 years pulling people from collapsed buildings, and that their survival depended on skills he'd hoped never to use again. Sometimes the most dangerous jobs find the people best equipped to handle them. Before we explore this intense story of disaster, expertise, and the courage to act when seconds count, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like Mike show us that heroes often wear hard hats instead of capes, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who risk everything to save others. Mike Torres had been working construction for exactly 3 years, 4 months, and 12 days. To his crew at Meridian Construction, he was a reliable foreman who understood building codes better than most engineers and could read structural blueprints like other people read newspapers. What they didn't know was that Mike's expertise came from 25 years of seeing what happened when buildings failed, when structural integrity was compromised, when tons of concrete and steel came crashing down on people who had nowhere to run. The Riverside Tower project was routine by construction standards. 12 stories of mixed-use development in downtown, steel frame construction with concrete floors, the kind of building Mike's crew had erected dozens of times before. Mike supervised the daily operations with a methodical attention to detail that had made him valuable to Meridian, ensuring safety protocols were followed and work progressed on schedule. But Mike's attention to structural details went beyond normal construction oversight. While other foremen checked for code compliance and quality control, Mike unconsciously analyzed every building for collapse patterns, load distribution, and potential failure points. Habits formed during 2.5 decades with the fire department's urban search and rescue unit died hard, especially when those habits had meant the difference between life and death for hundreds of people. Mike had joined the fire department straight out of high school, drawn by the combination of public service and physical challenge. After 5 years on regular engine companies, he had volunteered for specialized rescue training, eventually becoming one of the department's most experienced urban search and rescue specialists. Mike had worked building collapses, earthquake responses, terrorist attacks, and industrial accidents. Anywhere buildings fell down with people inside, Mike had been trained to go in and bring them out. The work had been brutal, physically and emotionally. Every collapse was a race against time, with victims trapped in void spaces that could close at any moment. Mike had learned to read the language of destroyed buildings, to identify which areas were stable enough for rescue operations and which were death traps waiting to claim more victims. He had pulled survivors from spaces so tight that other rescues couldn't fit, crawled through debris fields that shifted with every breath, and made split-second decisions that determined who lived and who died. The psychological toll had been enormous. 25 years of seeing what buildings could do to human bodies, of making life or death decisions in spaces where one wrong move could kill everyone involved. Mike had saved 127 people during his career, a number he kept private but never forgot. But the ones he couldn't save haunted him more than the ones he could. When Mike retired from the fire department, he had deliberately chosen construction work as a way to build instead of rescue, to create instead of responding to destruction. For 3 years, the strategy had worked. Mike found satisfaction in erecting buildings that would stand for decades, in contributing to growth rather than responding to catastrophe. The crew at Meridian knew Mike as competent, reliable, and unusually safety conscious. He insisted on safety protocols that went beyond normal requirements, checked structural integrity with an almost obsessive attention to detail, and had an uncanny ability to spot potential problems before they became dangerous. They attributed this to experience and professionalism, never suspecting that Mike's vigilance came from intimate knowledge of what happened when safety measures failed. On Tuesday afternoon, The crew was working on the 11th floor, installing steel beaming for the final structural elements. Mike was reviewing blueprints with the site engineer when he felt something that made his blood freeze, a subtle vibration in the building's frame. The kind of movement that spoke of structural stress beyond normal parameters. Mike looked up from the blueprints, his trained senses automatically assessing the building's condition. The vibration came again, stronger this time, followed by a sound that Mike recognized immediately. The groan of steel under load it wasn't designed to bear. "Everyone off this floor, now," Mike shouted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had issued similar orders in life or death situations. The crew looked at him with confusion. The building felt solid, the work was proceeding normally, and there were no obvious signs of danger. But something in Mike's tone made them start moving toward the exits. Mike was already running calculations in his head, analyzing the building's load distribution and identifying the most likely failure points. The vibrations were coming from the building's core, suggesting a problem with a central support structure that could trigger a progressive collapse. "Everybody out. Now, this building is coming down." The urgency in Mike's voice finally penetrated the crew's confusion. Workers dropped their tools and headed for the stairs, but Mike could feel the building's movement increasing. They had minutes, maybe less, before catastrophic failure at 2:47 p.m. The Riverside Tower's central support columns failed simultaneously. 12 stories of concrete and steel pancaked into the street in a matter of seconds, creating a debris field that extended across 4 lanes of traffic and buried 17 construction workers who hadn't made it clear of the collapse zone. Mike had been on the 9th floor stairwell when the building went down. The collapse threw him against the wall and buried him under debris, but his position in the stairwell created a void space that saved his life. As the dust settled and the sound of falling debris faded, Mike found himself in a partially collapsed stairwell with enough room to move and air to breathe. His first instinct was to call for help and wait for rescue, the normal civilian response to disaster. But as Mike listened to the voices of trapped co-workers calling out from the wreckage, his firefighter training took over. He wasn't a victim waiting for rescue. He was a rescue specialist with 25 years of experience, and 17 lives depended on what he did in the next few hours. Mike began moving through the collapse zone with skills he had hoped never to use again. He identified stable areas and dangerous zones, located void spaces where survivors might be trapped, and began the methodical process of search and rescue in an environment where one wrong step could trigger a secondary collapse that would kill everyone involved. The first survivor Mike reached was Danny Martinez, a young electrician trapped under a concrete slab that had his legs pinned but hadn't crushed them. Mike used debris as leverage to lift the slab just enough for Danny to crawl free, then move him to a safe area and continued searching. The second rescue was more complicated. Tom Wilson, a veteran carpenter, was trapped in a void space created by intersecting steel beams, conscious but unable to move. Mike had to crawl through a gap barely wider than his shoulders, assess Tom's condition, and figure out how to extract him without destabilizing the debris pile above them. Using techniques learned during countless rescue operations, Mike created a stable extrication path by carefully repositioning debris to create support points that wouldn't shift underweight. The process took 40 minutes of painstaking work, but Mike managed to pull Tom free without triggering a collapse. By the time the first emergency responders arrived on scene, Mike had located and rescued 8 of the 17 trapped workers. The arriving fire department captain found Mike directing other survivors in a makeshift rescue operation, using debris as tools and void spaces as staging areas with the expertise of someone who understood collapsed buildings intimately. "Who's in charge here?" the captain asked. "Mike Torres," one of the survivors replied. "He's been pulling people out for the last hour." The captain looked at Mike more closely, taking in his systematic approach to the rescue operation and his obvious familiarity with collapse rescue techniques. "You have training for this?" Mike nodded. 25 years, fire department urban search and rescue. Retired 3 years ago. The captain's expression shifted immediately. Urban search and rescue specialists were legendary in the fire service, warriors who operated in conditions that killed other rescuers. Finding one already on scene was like discovering a trauma surgeon at a car accident. What's the situation? Mike gave a rapid but comprehensive briefing on the collapse pattern, survival locations, and structural hazards that would affect rescue operations. His assessment was so thorough and professional that the captain immediately put him in charge of the technical rescue operation. For the next 6 hours, Mike led a coordinated effort that ultimately saved 15 of the 17 trapped workers. 2 had been killed in the initial collapse, but the other 15 owed their lives to Mike's immediate response and expert knowledge of collapse rescue techniques. The media coverage of the Riverside Tower collapse focused on the heroic rescue operation, but Mike avoided interviews and publicity. He returned to construction work the following week, but word had spread through the industry about the foreman who had led one of the most successful urban rescue operations in the city's history. Mike's employer, Meridian Construction, promoted him to a safety oversight position where his expertise could help prevent future disasters. Other construction companies began consulting with him on safety protocols and emergency response planning. Mike found a new purpose in using his rescue experience to make construction sites safer, preventing the kinds of disasters he had spent his career responding to. The 17 families whose loved ones came home safely from the Riverside Tower collapse never forgot that the miracle had come not from emergency responders racing to the scene, but from a quiet foreman who had carried 25 years of rescue experience into the collapse zone and used it to save lives one more time. Mike Torres never sought recognition for his actions that day. The skills that saved 17 lives had been honed in tragedies that claimed other victims, and Mike understood that heroism often came with a cost that wasn't visible in the headlines. But when disaster struck and people needed help, some skills were too valuable to leave unused, and some callings too important to abandon completely. The Riverside Tower site eventually became a memorial park, with a plaque honoring the 2 workers who died in the collapse. But for the 15 families who still gather for holidays and birthdays, the real memorial is the quiet man who turned a catastrophe into a rescue, proving that sometimes the most important heroes are the ones who were already on the scene when disaster struck. So I ask you, have you ever witnessed someone step forward in a crisis with skills that seem to come from nowhere? Someone whose calm competence in the face of disaster revealed a background that explained everything? Share their story in the comments. Because here at the Human Stories, we believe that the most powerful rescues often come from the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching. If Mike's story moved you, please subscribe and share this video. Help us honor those who carry their expertise quietly, ready to use their skills when lives hang in the balance, proving that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear hard hats and work boots. Until next time, remember, the person working beside you might have skills that could save your life. Sometimes the most ordinary jobs are done by the most extraordinary people.